by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. These preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
Billions of people just living out their lives, oblivious. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
Thank you, John Larson. I receive your kind words on behalf of all of our courageous members of the House of Representatives who want the best for the American people. And what we can do that is best for them in the next 24 hours is to pass affordable, accessible health care for all Americans. The best for all Americans is to have 32 million more people to have health insurance in our country. The best for...
Piece of stinking filth.
Shh, you're sitting at Shali. This is AJ of the InfoWars. Listen to the Shaliak. This is Alex Jones of InfoWars. Listen to Shaliak on the Cold Reality News and Report.
This is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Well, hello there.
As Ankara rolled its tanks into Syria, clashes broke out between police and protesters at an anti-war rally in the German city of Cologne. Thousands of people showed up at that demonstration demanding Ankara's withdrawal from Syria's Afrin region, where Turkey is carrying out what it calls an anti-terrorism operation. At some point, police stopped the gathering after banned Kurdish militia flags appeared. A similar demonstration was also held in London. The protests come as 7 civilians were reportedly killed in a recent Turkish airstrike. Here are latest pictures we've received from the ground. They show the aftermath of that attack. And it's feared that the airstrikes may have claimed even more lives, with people believed to be trapped under rubble. Witnesses claim the Turkish aerial bombardments are targeting residential areas.
There are no military zones here. All of them are civilian areas. The civilians were asleep. There was nothing. But they bombed us, even though there are no soldiers here. We are all civilians.
The shell fell about 25 meters away. Shrapnel ended up in my hand. I wanted to know why they were shelling civilians.
Well, Turkey says that it's conducting an anti-terror operation against Kurdish militia in Afrin. The offensive is supported by several anti-Syrian government groups. The areas they hold are marked on our map in green. The Turkish military claims that almost 400 Kurdish and ISIL fighters have been killed since the start of their operation. The UN, those raising concern, claiming 5,000 people have fled the area since the conflict started. Nevertheless, the Turkish leader has repeatedly vowed to expand the operation and most recently claimed that it would be extended all the way to the Iraqi border.
We are going to continue the olive branch operation until we achieve our goals. And then, as promised, we will clear Manbij of terrorists. After that, we will continue our struggle up to the Iraqi border until no terrorists are left.
Well, President Erdogan says that Turkey will push onwards to the city of Manbij and then further to the east towards the Iraqi border. The move would not only mean an all-out offensive against the Syrian Kurds, but could also threaten US personnel who are stationed in the area. The Turkish foreign ministers urged the US to immediately withdraw from Manbij. Well, American troops have been assisting the local Kurds in their anti-ISIL operation, with a Pentagon official recently announcing the creation of a 30,000-strong border security force in the region. Now, this was to be comprised largely of Kurds, something that infuriated Ankara, and it prompted it to launch that attack on Kurdish positions in Syria. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson later backtracked, though, on the idea. He said that officials had misspoken and that the plans had actually been misrepresented. Anti-war activist Richard Becker believes that Washington's behaviour can be explained by the fact that it's now caught between two allies.
We have what appears to be a somewhat intractable contradiction between the U.S. interest in Syria and the U.S. interest in NATO. And so this is something that they're trying to find a way out of, but it's very difficult given the fact that it was the United States, along with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, France, Britain, which caused the destabilization of Syria and led to the present circumstances. And the United States, on the other hand, is tied in with the YPG forces inside Syria, who have been the main fighting forces that the U.S. has been allied with in the battle against ISIS. But more than that, to maintain a U.S. presence inside Syria, which the U.S. military has been declaring is there for indefinitely.
The US Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, has said today Washington opposes the Nord Stream 2 pipeline over fears that it will increase European energy dependency on Russia. His comments came during a meeting with the Polish foreign minister in Warsaw.
Like Poland, the United States opposes the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We see it as undermining Europe's overall energy security and stability, and it provides Russia yet another tool to politicize energy as a political tool.
Well, Nord Stream 2 is a major pipeline project designed to pump Russian natural gas into Europe. But it's something of a divisive project. Nordic and Baltic countries have raised concerns that it would weaken European energy security. Germany and Austria, though, support the project and the need for cheaper gas supplies. Meanwhile, the United States also wants a slice of Europe's lucrative energy market, pitching its liquefied natural gas exports as an alternative to Russian natural gas. Okay, let's discuss this story with political analyst at the Berlin Center for Caspian Region Studies. That's Matthias Dornfeld. Matthias, very good evening to you. First of all, your response to Rex Tillerson's statement.
Yes, good evening. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, it has to be seen in the context of the U.S. sanctions against Russia, which were imposed last year in August, and it has to be seen also in the America First policy of President Trump, insofar as the United States wants to export their unconventional gas via LNG, liquefied natural gas, to the European market. I mean, most interesting market for them is, of course, the Asian market, but nevertheless, the European market is also one of their economic targets. And as you probably know, last year, Poland already signed a contract to import shale gas from the United States via their LNG terminal in Świnoujście. So it makes sense to bring up this statement, especially in Warsaw, as President Trump did last August, when he was, asking for closer relations between Central Europe and the United States.
Now, President Trump stated in Davos that the US is lifting restrictions for energy production. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
My administration is also taking swift action in other ways to restore American confidence and independence. We are lifting self-imposed restrictions on energy production to provide affordable power to our citizens and businesses and to promote energy security for our friends all around the world.
So we've got the United States saying that we're going to export natural gas, or liquefied natural gas, and it's very safe, great energy security with us. And also at the same time saying you don't want to take gas off the Russians, that'll give you bad energy security. They're just looking after their own interests, isn't that the case?
I mean, this is a competitive market, and now the United States wants to sell, and the Russians, want to sell their cheap gas. And the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a purely economic project, driven by companies, independent companies, and it enhances the energy security, especially if it comes to gas of Europe, because it brings more gas to Northwest Europe. And we can choose. I mean, we have so many options. We get the gas from Norway, we get the gas from Algeria, from the Southern Corridor in roughly 2 years. So there are a lot of options. So we are not getting any more dependent on Russian gas. It's just a question of the price. It's a question of the market, and it's purely the pure interest of the United States is to sell their gas in order, to bring up an own gas industry with a lot of employment. And I see it in this context. And that's why they try to play it in a somehow political way, but it is in economic interest of the United States.
So the warning coming out from the US and some European countries is energy security, that we won't have it. What do they mean by energy security, and are those concerns justified?
I mean, energy security is not in danger when we have the second string of Nord Stream. That's for sure. I mean, Russia somehow with the pipeline system and the whole infrastructure is more dependent on Europe than Europe is dependent on Russia. So we already reached energy security. It's only the question who has the biggest share in the market. And you saw last year Gazprom was quite lucky to export the highest amount of gas they ever did to Europe. It was like, including Turkey, was like 193 BCM, and the share of the German market was 54.3 BCM. So it's just the question who is giving the best offers and who has the best contracts, and that's why it should be regulated via the market, not via politics, in my opinion.
Despite political concerns, will Nord Stream 2 definitely be completed, in your opinion?
Yes, because it has the support of several governments, among them the German government, and it is, applying to the third energy package of the European Union, and all the other measures which are now taken undertaken by the Commission, purely political measures to stop Nord Stream. But I think it will be not stopped because it applies to all the regulations, and it has a lot of supporters, and it has also a big market. It brings Germany to the position to become a gas hub for Europe, giving gas to Central Europe, but also to Northwest Europe. And in my opinion, there will be no doubt that Nord Stream as a project of private companies will be realized.
Matthias, appreciate your time and your views. My guest, Matthias Dornfeld, political analyst at the Berlin Center for Caspian Region Studies.
Washington has accused Turkey of destabilizing northern Syria after Ankara announced it's extending its military operation closer to positions held by US troops in the region. Turkey's operation began last week and is targeting Kurdish militia. Some of the groups are considered a terrorist by Ankara, but allies by Washington. The US State Department has described what is happening in northern Syria as a shame.
People now have to flee an area that was previously considered pretty stable. I mean, what a shame that is. Think about all that this country has been through, and now we're looking at another disruption in northwestern Syria because Turkey is taking its eye off the ball, ISIS, and going after the PKK at this time.
The weapons have been provided to the YPG by the United States. The promises which have never been kept by the United States since Manbij. Lately, Trump's statements saying that we won't give any weapons to YPG anymore, even as he was saying that we are not giving in last night's telephone conversation, created a trust crisis.
However, the phone call between the Turkish and American presidents mentioned by Ankara's foreign minister there has been viewed differently by the two countries.
President Trump relayed concerns that escalating violence in Afrin, Syria, risks undercutting our shared goals in Syria. He urged Turkey to de-escalate, limit its military actions, and avoid civilian casualties.
The White House statement about the content of the phone call between Trump and Erdogan was probably drafted before the conversation took place, because it did not reflect the truth.
Our Washington correspondent, Samira Khan, looks at the deteriorating relations between the two allies.
No matter how many times Washington says Ankara is its ally, the reality is far from it. As distrust between the two grows stronger, U.S.-Turkish relations are headed south.
Turkey is an important NATO ally. We fully understand Turkey's concerns.
Şimdi artık Amerika
America is in the process of creating a terrorist army on our border. America, do not encroach on our borders. Do not provoke us, or we will run out of patience.
This has led to consequences on the ground. In Manbij, the Turks and the Kurds came so close to each other they were almost at each other's throats. And then Washington literally had to step in to prevent them from fighting. But no lessons learned, clearly, especially considering the Turkish campaign against the Kurds in Afrin right now. Don't be friends with Kurds if you want to keep good relations isn't the only signal Washington missed. The coup attempt back in 2016 made things worse. There's Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish cleric living in exile in the U.S. Ankara thinks Gulen orchestrated it and demands that the U.S. extradite him. And recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital didn't do their relations any good either. And it even created an opening for Erdogan to grab the throne as leader of the Muslim world's resistance to Washington's move.
Trump, why are you backing Israel where there is occupation, torture, and terrorism? Is that what you are defending?
One would think that the U.S. would take the fury of their ally into consideration before making any rash decisions, but instead of treading carefully, Washington threatened to cut aid to all of the countries opposed to the Jerusalem decision.
The most important problem between the United States and Turkey is that there is no, nobody, trusts the other one. This is the main problem for Turkey, especially Turkish people and Turkish government never rely on, never trust in United States, especially in Middle Eastern issues.
So whether this has all been deliberate or not, Washington has only been tangling this knot further and further.
Journalists in the US have noticed a quietly made edit to the official mission statement of the National Security Agency online. It turns out the words honesty, trust and openness are now all gone. The old core values used to begin with the word honesty, saying that the American people have placed great trust in the NSA and therefore the agency promises to honour that with openness. Well, now it instead starts with the phrase commitment to service. Here's how the NSA explain the changes.
It's nothing more than a website update. That's all it is.
The effort to delete words that are that mean a lot to Americans, such as honesty and transparency and what have you, is something that is important. But if the National Security Agency is deleting it, I think that it means that they're getting more according to reality as to just how these intelligence agencies work. They're not called the deep state for nothing. And the only thing that they did agree that they did keep was the provision of respecting the law, but even there they fudge on that.
Now, at least 95 people have been killed and nearly 160 injured after a large explosion rocked the Afghan capital, Kabul. That's according to reports citing Interior Ministry officials. Local journalist Bilal Sawari reports from the ground.
We understand at this stage that the attacker was in an ambulance. He had said he had a patient and that he was stopped at the second checkpoint by the police force. The attack took place right in the heart of Kabul. This is not very far from the Swedish embassy, from the European Union, from the Indonesian embassy, and from the High Peace Council, which is down the road. The attack shows this constant issue of security and intelligence breaches. The area where the attack took place is less than 100 meters from the office of the police chief of Kabul, less than 20 meters away from key Afghan intelligence facilities. Once the area is cleared and once the dust settles, unfortunately, we will be hearing that a lot of those killed are ordinary people who are simply the only breadwinners for their families. And the people of Afghanistan continue to suffer. They continue to bear the brunt of this conflict at a time when we also see all sides intensifying the war.
Afghanistan has seen a spike in deadly terror attacks recently. Early this week, ISIL militants attacked the office of the humanitarian group Save the Children in the city of Jalalabad. It was followed by a car bomb exploding outside the premises. Up to 50 people were reportedly in the building at the time of the attack. Up to 6 people were killed and dozens more injured. Save the Children has since announced it's suspending its operations in Afghanistan. And last Saturday, Taliban militants carried out a siege attack on a luxury hotel in Kabul that left at least 22 dead. Political analyst Abdullah Hayward says the Afghan security forces lack a coherent strategy in the fight against numerous terror groups.
The situation is getting from bad to worse. The Afghan security forces are unable, to have a proper strategy or plan for curbing terrorism, not only in Kabul city, but all over Afghanistan. And now that we are heading towards the spring, in the next 2-3 months, probably insurgent attacks will increase in Afghanistan, and we might end up losing quite a few provinces to the hands of Taliban. The international community, headed by the U.S. government, and with their failed strategies, we have seen incidents in Iraq. We have seen, the worsening situation in Libya, in other countries, and for the past 16, 17 years, we have been witnessing these failed strategies in Afghanistan. I don't think, they have a strategy for Afghanistan.
Northern Syria. More on the clips that you just listened to regarding Afghanistan and Russia using energy as a political tool. That's our job. Such hypocrites. Double standards. Kurds slam U.S. for not fighting Turkish occupation of Afrin. What are they waiting for? The flu from hell. Schools closed, getting worse. Steve Wynn resigns from RNC amid sex allegations. Dozens now recount misconduct. And of course, the board to probe into and investigate Wynn's wiener. Trump tells Theresa May to get tougher. She's part of the bloodline. Act like it. Paris on high alert. Swollen River continues to rise. Must be climate change. You bastards. Hackers making ATMs spit cash out. Sharon Stone warns against punishing all sexual predators. Can't charge a person with murder when they only got a parking ticket. 3 more women accused Jeremy Piven. Spermageddon, human race infertile in 50 years. Well, that just seems like part of the agenda for planet Earth. Welcome to Cold Reality Radio here on the UCY.TV Broadcasting Network. January 28th, we're already almost 1 month into the new year. And it's getting interesting, as you would imagine. What's happening now that, post Putin and the Russians coming in to, of course, at Assad's request, to come in and free them from the grassroots jihadis over the last 5 or 6 years of this so-called Syrian civil war, which was not internal but externally driven. Of course, all the West has to do is say someone's a bad guy, and they're doing this to their people, they're doing that to their people, and then next thing you know, regime change starts. Well, we know this is the blueprint that's always been used. It is what evil does. Evil will say others are doing evil, so that we must go in and save those from that evil so that the real true evil can evolve. And who's ever left after the so-called evil killed all of the people and ruined all the people's lives and displaced 5,000 people or more. We know in the case of Syria, it's much higher than 5,000. And of course, the UN saying, "What's going on? Since this broke out about a week ago, 5,000 people have been displaced." Okay, where the fuck was the UN when Libya was being raped and pillaged by NATO? And where the fuck was the UN when Syria was being raped and fucking pillaged, and their youth and people in the thousands, the hundreds of thousands even, were displaced and sent into Germany as part of the agenda to do so? Where was the UN there? The UN is fucking worthless. They are worthless. They are effective when they want to be, and they're mostly useless until, I would imagine, things get more dire in the future. And then, of course, all the funding will go to let's save all these countries. We need to send in UN peacekeepers. And then, of course, they'll go in and either spread cholera or just straight up start killing people. And it's sad how most people have this thumbsucker, juvenile understanding of how the world operates, which is the absolute opposite of what is. The absolute opposite of what is going on. And we will pay for that here in this corporation, in this part of the takeover of mankind, womankind. We will pay for what we do not understand which can be easily understood if you just understand that America, the U.S., is not a force for good. They're not a force for good. But what they do is they seem to get everybody complicit in their crimes, whether it be through tax dollars, through voting in these horrendous elections. 2 years of Trump and Hillary and all of the divide and conquer that went along with that. You can only imagine the mentality of those who truly, truly believe that Trump's going to save everybody. And then the even more detrimental mutation of those who believe in Hillary Clinton. And Bill Clinton, when all they've done is rape and pillage everything that they've put their hands on or even thought about. Haiti, and other places. The childlike mentality. And then, of course, the media that pushes these vile creatures in our direction. Again, to manufacture consent for those to vote to legitimize this illegitimate system from jump. But again, the brainwashing is so magnificent that you will have people in their 40s and 50s and 60s saying, this is the greatest system in the world. 100 years ago, nobody was living like this. Obviously, people weren't living like this. People were more self-reliant. People were, growing their own food, doing things without or with very little need from the system. And while that was happening, we get these banking families and banking institutions that have pretty much taken over the world. They've pretty much taken over the world. There's more than enough evidence to show the damage that they've done, not only here, but in second and third world countries. They have raped and pillaged Africa. Libya was just the most recent raping. Let me see here. Let's see if we can get this. This is Probably one of the best breakdowns. Let's see. I played it yesterday. Let's see if I can pull it up here, but for the most part, it looks like. See if I can. It was just a brilliant breakdown by Lee Camp of everything that has happened and the so-called justification for it. And of course, I cannot find it. So maybe if I go into history. Anyway.
It's a big news.
All right, so let me see if I can. I don't think I'll be able to find this, of course. It's right there on my screen yesterday, and okay, here we go. This is brilliant. General Mattis.
Big news, folks. The war on terror is over. We did it. We did it. According to General Mad Dog Mattis, the U.S. national security focus is no longer terrorism, which is it blows my mind. It's incredible. We finally won. Since terror is an emotion. So it's like having a war on jealousy, and we did it. We fucking did it. Here's the general.
Great power competition, not terrorism, is now the primary focus of U.S. national security.
I really can't believe it, because after all these years, the war on terror is over. So, Johnny, tell them what they won. Well, we went into Afghanistan to stop the terrorists behind 9/11. Unfortunately, almost all the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia, and bin Laden was in Pakistan. But we destroyed Afghanistan anyway, winning a warlord's paradise. And that's not all. We built up the opium production, which means we also won an opioid epidemic. Good times for all. We then went into Iraq to stop the weapons of mass destruction, even though the CIA knew there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. And we found out there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. But we did manage to torture some folks and kill or facilitate the deaths of about 1 million people. And in the process, we won the creation of ISIS. Then, with our buddies at NATO, we went into Libya, which had the highest level of standard of living in any African country before our arrival. We certainly put a stop to that. Breaking the country up, we won ongoing civil war. Next, on to Syria, which, lucky for us, everything's gone pretty well. It's been fine there, I think. I mean, why? What have you heard? What are people saying? We've also backed and facilitated the ongoing genocide in Yemen. But keep in mind that while the average American worker got nothing out of all of these wars other than moral bankruptcy and fear, the ruling elite won billions of dollars. Dick Cheney's Halliburton alone got $39 billion from the Iraq War. Quite the windfall. So, congratulations. This has been your war on terror. Yeah. You know, it's almost as if we didn't really care about terror, and we destroyed all those countries for other reasons. Luckily, some U.S. officials have begun talking about that. In recent testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, 4 former U.S. diplomats provided remarkably candid commentary on recent U.S. involvement in the Middle East, indicating that the major concerns have always been the region's oil, location, and function in the global economy. One official pointed out the region contains half of global proven oil reserves, accounts for 1/3 of oil production and exports, and is home to 3 of the world's 4 biggest oil transit choke points. Folks, I don't want to come off as some sort of tinfoil hat Alex Jones guy here, but I think the war on terror has been about oil, money, and power. I do. But you can't You can't just come out and say that to people, or else we wouldn't support it. We would freak out, right? You got to find something else, say it differently. It's kind of like a close talker. You can't just go, oh, your face is so close to my face. Why is this happening? Right? You have to find other ways, pretend you're eating or something, kind of get them to back up. So as Ajamu Baraka wrote last week, neocons like William Crystal, Paul Wolfowitz, and Richard Pearl, who were the driving forces in pushing for the war in Iraq, understood if they wanted to sell war, Americans needed to believe the conflict was about values, not interests. And these neocons, which are both Democrats and Republicans now, have made billions off these wars. And they're the ones funding Congress to begin with. But General Mattis disagrees.
This is a national defense strategy, but what it really is, ladies and gentlemen, this is an American strategy. It belongs to you. You own it. We work for you.
What a fucking mental patient.
You think your strategy is to work for me? I don't think that's a strategy. Because polls show most Americans don't want war, and yet we always seem to be at war. So it doesn't sound like you work for us. It sounds a lot like you work for the weapons contractors and the oil companies and the war hawks. So cut the bullshit, Elmer Fudd with an Uzi. All right? These wars have always been about money and power. Several of our invasions were after a country either dropped the U.S. dollar or threatened to, as in Libya. On top of threatening the dollar, Gaddafi also challenged AFRICOM's intent to establish military bases in Africa. AFRICOM is our pivot to cover Africa in military bases in order to counter China's increasing influence there. Let's hear some more from General Mattis.
It is inside the framework of that national security strategy, specifically where it states that we're to protect the American people, the homeland, and the American way of life.
Well, we're not protecting all of the American people, not the people in Flint sucking on lead, not the indigenous people fighting against pipelines, not the prisoners filling our jails arrested for minor drug charges, not the soldiers who come back and are waiting in line at the VA, not the immigrant families that we're destroying in order to deport someone who's been here 40 years. But there's a solid handful of rich people we care a lot about.
Protect our way of life, stand with our allies, and live up to our responsibility to pass intact to the next generation those freedoms that all of us enjoy here today.
Those freedoms all of us enjoy? What freedoms are left? I think the only freedom we have left is the freedom to ask for free ranch dressing on our overstuffed baked potato cheesecake taco nuggets. Wow, what a free country we have here. Don't worry. General McJowls here is going to, quote, pass it intact to the next generation. Are you? The environment is collapsing. What are you passing intact? Half of our wildlife have died over the past 40 years. The coral reefs are more dried up than Clint Eastwood's ball bag. And the oceans are filled with plastic. Plus, the military is the largest polluter on Earth. And you want to talk to me about passing it to the next generation? It's like passing a kidney stone onto your children. What? So what's the answer, General Mattis?
Builds a more lethal force to compete strategically.
Oh, you want our forces to be more lethal? If we get much more lethal, it will just be the cockroaches left discussing how awesome our military was. Like, holy shit, man, did you see that? That was fucking nuts. They killed everyone.
This required some tough choices, ladies and gentlemen, and we made them based upon a fundamental precept, namely that America can afford survival.
Just to clarify, I'm not talking about survival by mitigating climate change. I don't know why I'm making him Southern. I think he should be Southern. But mitigating climate change, making our air breathable, our water drinkable, and our food edible, that kind of survival we just don't have the time and money for. I said fucking eat your PCBs, GMOs, and glyphosates, all right? Puts hair on the chest. It does. Drink a big old glass of chlorofarbulene. It's good for you.
Rogue regimes like North Korea and Iran persist in taking outlaw actions that threaten regional and even global stability.
America, headed by Donald Trump, is the real beacon of stability. We make Courtney Love at 4 a.m. plastered on ice skates look stable. And he says North Korea persists, but he really means 2/3 of North Korea persists because we obliterated 1/3 of their population during the Korean War. Literally 1/3 of their population. But the general isn't done with those rogue nations.
Oppressing their own people and shredding their own people's dignity and human rights, they push their warped views outward.
Pushing their warped views outward. Is this one of those accuse the other guy of the thing you're guilty of kind of tactics? Is that what's going on here? I'm just trying to figure it out.
Nations that do seek to create a world consistent with their authoritarian models, pursuing veto authority over other nations' economic, diplomatic, and security decisions.
So that's a yes. Yeah, accuse the other guy of the thing you do. Got it. Okay.
We have been operating also for 9 of the last 10 years under continuing resolutions that have created an overstretched and under-resourced military.
Under-resourced! He said under-resourced! They have $1 trillion budget! The war on terror has cost $250 million a day for 16 years! Do you have any idea what that money could have done for infant mortality, health care for the poor, food for the hungry, housing for the homeless, or pools? They could have given us each a pool. We could have our own pools.
To those who would threaten America's experiment in democracy, they must know if you challenge us, it will be your longest and your worst day.
Oh. Anybody who challenges our experiment in democracy, we'll fuck them up, huh? Great. How about the head of Trump's defunct voter fraud commission, Chris Kobach, who created Interstate Crosscheck that helped purge over 1 million people, mainly voters of color, from the rolls? Let's hit Interstate Crosscheck with some semi-automatic rifle fire, huh? How about the DNC for being provably corrupt and financially rigging the 2016 primary, as former DNC chair Donna Brazile admitted in her book? That sounds like screwing with our democracy. Can we use our missile defense shields to stop the DNC from fucking up our democracy? Huh? How about the New York Board of Elections, which confessed in court to purging 100,000 likely Bernie voters? How about the corporate media, which gave Donald Trump 23 times as much coverage as Bernie Sanders? I agree with you, General Mattis. Use the military on those who threaten our democracy.
The department will do more than just listen to other nations' ideas. We will be willing to be persuaded by them, recognizing that not all good ideas come from the country with the most aircraft carriers.
Yeah, but most of the bad ones do. But I bet some of you are wondering, there are probably many opinions on whether we should be at war, where we should be at war. How do they make those decisions?
It starts with me having breakfast every week with Secretary of State Tillerson. And we talk 2-3 times a day sometimes. We settle all of our issues between he and I, and then we walk together into the White House meetings.
Yes! Have no fear, folks! The general known for drone bombing weddings and the former CEO of ExxonMobil hash out all their differences before they present their ideas of which part of the world to explode to get the go-ahead from an ex-reality TV star. This is like saying, don't worry, we took different opinions into account when deciding whether to toss the baby into the alligator pond. All right? We asked the alligator on the right and the alligator on the left, and they both agreed. Toss the baby. But don't worry. General Mattis also gets outside opinions.
But that is never enough. I want an outside view as well. And that's why we have a very close link with the CIA and foreign intelligence services.
He also consults the peaceniks at the CIA. Thank God. General, you really covered your bases on that one. You just consulted everyone. Finally, Mattis wrapped it all up with the perfect analogy.
I was trying to think of how do I put America first into, in my mind, an alliance framework. And as we were getting ready to take off, you know what happened. You all can recite it from memory. The stewardess was standing there, and she said, in the event we lose cabin pressure, you know what's coming next, every one of you, don't you? When the masks drop, put your own mask on first, then help others.
Hold on. He views our relationship with military allies as a daddy with a toddler on a crashing plane with low oxygen. And let's be honest, the only reason for the oxygen masks is so that the passengers stop screaming as the flight goes into the side of a mountain. Wow, General, you inspire as much confidence in our future as the band playing on the deck of the Titanic. In the broad picture, our military and our military leadership are a form of thought cancer. They convince us infinite war is the only path forward and that peace is never even an option. They spend $1 trillion a year building up that idea and just about $0 spent on the other side. As the book, The New Human Rights states, when ideas persist for a long enough period, they often create emotional connections on the personal identity level and institutional establishments on the cultural level, which tend to perpetuate a kind of circular reinforcement, generally resisting change and adaptation. We have built up thought patterns, institutions, profit motives, and legal frameworks that all reinforce our military-industrial complex. The opposite, peace and cooperation, is never considered because it is an existential threat to the Pentagon, the weapons contractors, the think tanks, and the people filling the seats of Congress and the White House. All right? It's time to break out of this thought paradigm. How about that for a strategy?
Thanks for joining this week. Cold Reality Radio. Stay tuned for more incredible programming today on UCY.
System of systems. I will MK Ultra ya. Put the MK scope on ya. If the MK hits you, it's guaranteed to open ya. The 57mm Mark 110. 220 rounds a minute, try to stop them. Don't put that on your wish list, that's retarded babble. Protesters make the hit list soon as they start to rabble. They are nothing but fishes in the barrel. It doesn't have to be Christmas for a carol. Some decorate with ornamental decorum. Some perform shock and awe on Hanukkah and Purim. That's where my job come in. I am a blessing to the mercenary for the corporation selling weapons to them. Any potential competitor step into them. I'm authorized to knock them out and stick a GPS into them. They want to sell uranium to Iran that's enriched. That's a bitch. Now we gotta teach them lessons.